Margaret dragged Chica out of the bathtub, and then she placed her on the floor of the bathroom. Chica was motionless. Margaret sneaked out of the room with a wicked smile on her face. People say the walls of a house cannot talk, but if Madame Anita's mansion could speak, it would shout out one secret that was shaking the house like silent thunder. Margaret was only 20 years old. She was beautiful, calm, and respectful. She had a soft smile that made people trust her easily. She worked as a maid in the home of a very wealthy man named Mr. Daniel and his wife, Anita. Everyone in the compound liked Margaret because she did her work well and never argued with anyone. But behind her quiet face, a secret was growing like a shadow. Whenever Madame Anita traveled or stayed out late, Margaret and Mr. Daniel became different people. Something changed between them. Their eyes met longer than normal. Their voices became softer when they talked, and then she would quietly walk to the master bedroom. Moments later, Mr. Daniel would follow, pretending he forgot something inside the room. They would lock the door gently behind themselves. And then, silence. After a while, faint sounds would fill the room, like whispers behind closed walls. Another maid, Chica, worked in the house too. Chica was older and more experienced. She did not talk much, but she noticed everything. Every time she passed the hallway during Anita's absence, she heard low sounds from the master bedroom. Sounds that did not sound like someone watching a movie, or someone sleeping, or someone praying. Sounds that no one should be making with a boss. At first, Chica ignored it. She believed adults could handle their own choices. She told herself it was none of her business. But the more she saw, the more she heard, the more her heart became heavy. One afternoon she opened the kitchen door and mistakenly caught a glimpse of Mr. Daniel's hand brushing against Margaret's waist as he handed her a glass. Margaret looked nervous but did not move away. They both pretended like nothing happened when Chica entered, but their eyes told a different story. Chica kept quiet. She was not a troublemaker. She only wanted peace in her workplace, but peace was slowly disappearing from the house. Days passed, then weeks. Mr. Daniel grew bolder. He started giving Margaret gifts, small things like body lotion, new slippers, snacks, and sometimes even money. Margaret always hid them under her bed. She knew what they were doing was wrong, but she kept saying to herself, "He is my boss. He knows what is right. Maybe he truly cares for me." But deep inside her, she feared something. One evening, when Madame Anita traveled for a business seminar, Mr. Daniel and Margaret locked themselves in the room again. Chica stood at the end of the corridor, shaking her head slowly. She felt pity for everyone involved: Madame Anita, who knew nothing, Mr. Daniel, who pretended to be a loving husband, and Margaret, who was too young to understand the danger of her choices. This time, Chica could not keep quiet anymore. When Anita returned from her trip after 4 days, she came home with smiles, gifts for everyone, and stories from her journey. She hugged her husband, thanking him for taking care of the house. She greeted the maids warmly, but Chica stood aside, confused. Her heart was beating fast. Should she talk? Should she keep quiet? Anita noticed her nervousness. After dinner, Anita called her privately to the backyard. "Chica, are you okay?" she asked gently. Chica swallowed hard. "Madam, please don't be angry with me." Anita frowned slightly. "Just talk. What is it?" Chica raised her head slowly. "Madam, something has been happening in your absence. Something I don't know how to keep hiding." Anita felt her chest tighten. "What is it?" she asked again, this time with a shaky voice. Chica hesitated, but the truth pushed itself out. "Madam, I think something is going on between Sir and Margaret." Anita froze. Chica continued, her voice trembling. "Any time you travel, they lock themselves in your bedroom. I hear sounds. I see them look at each other in strange ways. I didn't want to say anything before, but it has become too much." Anita stepped back as if someone pushed her. Her entire body felt weak. For a moment, she could not breathe. Her hands shook. Her heart started beating fast. She wanted to scream. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions. But instead, she forced a smile and calmly asked, "Are you sure of what you are saying?" "Yes, madam," Chica replied with fear in her eyes. Anita felt tears gathering behind her eyelids. "My husband and a maid." "No. Impossible. Daniel would never do that. He loves me too much. But the fear inside her kept growing. She took a slow breath. Okay, she said softly, don't tell anyone else, and do not say anything to Margaret or my husband. Chica nodded quickly. Yes, madam, I won't. Anita continued in a quiet voice, whenever you see anything again, anything at all, call me. Even if it is late, even if I am not around, I want to know everything. Yes, madam, Chica agreed, but when Anita walked back into the house, her legs felt like sand. She forced a smile whenever she passed her husband or Margaret. She even joined him in the living room that night to watch TV. But her mind was far away. Her world felt like it was shaking. My husband and Margaret? That cannot be true, she kept saying to herself. Daniel. No. He cannot do something like that. Maybe Chica misunderstood. Maybe they were discussing something important. Maybe Margaret needed help with something. Or could it be the reason why he said no cameras in the house for now? Maybe. But doubt filled her heart like cold water. That night, Anita did not ask her husband anything. She did not question Margaret. She did not shout. She did not show anger. She decided to investigate quietly. She wanted to see the truth with her own eyes, not hear it from another person. For the first time since her marriage, Anita could not sleep. She kept turning on the bed, staring at Daniel beside her. He slept peacefully, breathing calmly, unaware of the storm rising inside his wife. Every time he moved, Anita swallowed hard. She wanted to wake him and ask, Daniel, are you seeing Margaret? But she didn't. She planned something else. The next day, she pretended everything was normal. She dressed up, kissed her husband goodbye, and told him she was going out for a business meeting. But she did not truly leave. She waited in her car a bit outside the gate for hours. She wanted to see if something would happen as soon as she stepped out. Minutes passed, then an hour, then two. Nothing. Anita rubbed her forehead. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe Chica was wrong. Maybe there was no secret. Maybe she had allowed fear to control her heart. She started her car engine, but suddenly paused, because at that exact moment her phone vibrated. It was a message from Chica. Her heart jumped. She opened the message with shaking hands, and what she saw made her eyes widen, her breathing stop, and her entire body grow cold. The message said, Madam, it is happening again. The moment she read Chica's message, she jumped out of the car. She did not even lock the door properly. Her heart was beating so fast that it felt like it would jump out of her chest. She hurried toward the house on foot, her hands shaking, her mind racing. Please let this not be true, she kept saying inside her heart. Please, God, let this be a mistake. As soon as she stepped into the house, Chica was already standing close to the door. Her eyes were wide, her face looked pale, like someone who had seen something frightening. She did not speak. She only lifted her hand slowly and pointed upstairs, straight toward Mr. Daniel's bedroom. Anita did not ask any questions. She turned and rushed up the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her legs were weak, but she forced herself to move faster. Her heart was pounding loudly in her ears. When she reached the bedroom door, she did not knock. She pushed the door open suddenly, and then she froze. Mr. Daniel was lying on the bed, sleeping, deeply asleep, fully dressed. His shirt was neatly buttoned, his belt was still on, his shoes were placed beside the bed. His phone was on the bedside table. The room was quiet. Too quiet. Anita stood there in shock. This was not what she expected. Her eyes moved quickly around the room. She checked under the bed. Nothing. She rushed to the bathroom and opened the door. Empty. She checked the wardrobe. She pulled the curtains aside. There was no one. Nothing looked out of place. Her heart began to slow down, but her confusion grew deeper. What is going on? She asked herself. She walked closer to the bed and stared at her husband's face. He looked peaceful. Like someone who had slept without any worry, there was no sign that anyone had been with him moments earlier. Anita stepped back slowly and closed the door gently. She walked downstairs, her mind spinning. Chica was still standing where Anita had left her. What exactly did you see or hear? I found my husband sleeping, Anita said, trying hard to keep her voice calm. Chica swallowed hard. Madam, I swear to God, I heard voices, I heard movement. It came from the bedroom. I would never lie to you." Anita stared at her. She did not shout, she did not argue, she did not accuse her. She only nodded slowly. "All right," she said quietly. "Go back to your work." But inside her heart, doubt had started growing like a seed. What if Chica is mistaken? What if she imagined everything? What if someone is trying to cause trouble in my home? Anita turned and went back upstairs. She entered the bedroom again and gently touched her husband's shoulder. "Daniel," she said softly, "aren't you going to the office?" He opened his eyes slowly and stretched. "Oh, I slept off," he said. "I was waiting for a call and must have dozed off." Anita forced a smile. "You'll be late." "I know," he replied calmly as he sat up. "I thought you already left," he asked. "Yes, I came to pick up something I forgot," Anita replied. Anita walked out of the room, but her heart was heavy. Something did not feel right, yet nothing she saw proved anything. Later that morning, she left the house with too many questions in her mind. Unknown to her, someone else in the house was also thinking deeply. Margaret. Margaret had noticed changes. She noticed how Madame Anita suddenly came back without warning. She noticed how Chica watched her closely. She noticed the tension in the house. Margaret's heart was full of fear. Someone is talking, she thought. Someone is watching. Her eyes slowly turned toward Chica. It must be her. The thought refused to leave her mind. Every time Chica walked past her, Margaret felt uncomfortable. Every time Chica looked at her, Margaret felt exposed. Fear slowly turned into anger, and anger turned into a dangerous plan. That morning, Chica went into her room to take her bath. She closed the door, humming softly. She did not know she was not alone. Margaret stood outside the door, listening. Her heart was beating fast, her hands were shaking. She pushed the door gently and stepped inside. What happened next was something no one would talk about openly. Later, Margaret came out of the room looking calm. Too calm. She carefully arranged everything to look normal. She wiped surfaces. She made the bed neatly. She made sure nothing looked strange. Then she walked out quietly and returned to her duties like nothing had happened. Time passed. The house remained quiet. Too quiet. By afternoon, no one had seen Chica. By evening, no one had heard her voice. The other maids began to whisper. "Where is Chica?" one asked. "Maybe she went out," another replied, but it didn't even cross anyone's mind to go check her room. When Madame Anita returned home that evening, she asked a simple question that made Margaret's heart skip. "Where is Chica?" Margaret turned slowly. Her mouth opened, but no words came out immediately. And for the first time, fear showed clearly in her eyes. "We haven't seen her since morning," one of the maids said softly. The words fell into the living room like heavy stones. Madame Anita stopped walking. She slowly turned around and looked at the maid who spoke. Her heart skipped. "Since morning?" Anita asked. "Are you sure?" "Yes, madam," the maid replied. "I thought she was resting." Margaret quickly raised her head. "Yes, madam," she said, forcing a calm voice. "I haven't seen her too." But inside Margaret's chest, her heart was racing wildly. Her palms were wet with sweat. Her ears were ringing. Since morning? Why now? Why today? Anita looked from one maid to another. Something did not feel right. "Did anyone check her room?" Anita asked. The question hit Margaret like a slap. Her breath caught. For a second, she felt dizzy. Her legs almost gave way. She forced herself to stay still. "No, madam," another maid replied quickly. "We thought today was her off day, so we didn't bother to check her room. But let me go and check." Before anyone could say another word, the maid rushed out of the house toward the quarters behind the main building. The others followed slowly, whispering among themselves. Margaret stood frozen. Her feet felt heavy. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to stop them. She wanted to say something. But her lips refused to move. Anita followed them. The quarters were quiet. Too quiet. The door to Chica's room was slightly open. The maid pushed it wider and stepped inside. What happened next happened very fast. A loud scream filled the air. Everyone froze for 1 second. Then panic broke loose. Anita and the other maids ran inside the room. The scream came again, louder this time, filled with fear. They rushed toward the bathroom, and there on the floor was Chica. She was lying still. She was wrapped in a towel, her body did not move. Her eyes were closed. "Chica," Anita shouted. She rushed forward and knelt beside her. She touched her arm. It was cold. "Chica, wake up, please wake up," Anita cried. No response. Someone ran outside to call for help. Another maid began to cry loudly, the room filled with confusion, fear, and loud voices. They quickly carried Chica out and rushed her to the hospital. The journey felt like forever. At the hospital, doctors and nurses moved quickly. Anita stood outside, her hands shaking. Her mind could not understand what was happening. After a long time, a doctor came out. His face was serious. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "She is gone." The words felt unreal. Anita felt the world spin around her. She held the wall to stop herself from falling. The maids burst into tears. Some sat on the floor, some cried loudly. Some were too shocked to speak. The doctor explained that it could have been a bathroom accident. He said such things happen sometimes. No one argued. No one questioned him. No one suspected anything. The house changed after that day. Silence took over. Chica's bed remained empty. Her slippers stayed by the door. Her clothes were untouched. Her laughter was gone. Days passed. No one cooked properly. No one joked. No one smiled. Madame Anita barely spoke. She stayed in her room most of the time, staring at nothing. She blamed herself again and again. If only I had stayed home that day. Daniel tried to comfort her, but she felt distant. Something inside her had broken. Margaret moved quietly around the house, too quietly. She helped more. She smiled more. She sang softly while working. She acted like someone who had nothing to hide. Weeks passed. Slowly, the house returned to normal. One evening, Anita sat beside her husband on the bed. She looked tired. Her eyes were dull. "I need to travel," she said quietly. Daniel looked at her. "Travel? Where?" "China," she replied. "Business. I'll be away for 2 months." Daniel was surprised. "2 months?" She nodded. "I need space. I need to focus." He pulled her into his arms. "I'll miss you." She rested her head on his chest, but felt nothing. The next morning, Anita packed her bags and left the house. She hugged Daniel one last time, unaware that this goodbye would open a door she never expected. As soon as the gate closed behind Anita's car, Margaret's face changed. Her steps became lighter, her smile became brighter. That same morning, she quietly entered Daniel's bedroom. And night after night, morning after morning, she returned. Daniel gave her gifts, beautiful things, expensive things. She hid them carefully where no one would see. She laughed more, she sang louder, she walked with confidence. The other maids noticed, but no one spoke. Because some secrets are louder than words. Just a few days after Madame Anita traveled to China, the house completely changed. It was no longer the same house. The air felt different. The silence felt heavier. The rules that once existed were quietly broken, one after another. And at the center of it all was Margaret. Before, Margaret was just one of the maids. She woke up early, cleaned, cooked, and answered orders like every other maid in the house. But now, nobody ordered her anymore. Nobody dared to. The other maids noticed it first. Whenever Margaret entered the kitchen, conversations stopped. When she walked into the sitting room, everyone suddenly found something to do. If she spoke, even in a low voice, everyone listened carefully. She no longer greeted anyone properly. She no longer apologized. She gave instructions instead. "Why is the floor still dirty?" she would ask, standing with her hands on her waist. One of the maids would quickly speak. "Sorry, Margaret. I will clean it again." Margaret would hiss and walk away. Another day she tasted the food and frowned. "This soup has no taste," she said loudly. "Is this how you people now cook?" No one replied. They all knew that Margaret was now closer to the boss than anyone else in the house. Daniel treated her differently too. He no longer hid it well. He would call her name softly from his room, sometimes in the morning, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the afternoon when the house was quiet. Margaret would answer happily. She entered his room freely now, no fear, no shame, no caution. At night, Daniel would take her out. They went to expensive restaurants where people dressed well and spoke softly. Margaret sat confidently beside him, wearing dresses she never dreamed of owning before. They went to nightclubs, where music was loud and lights were bright. Daniel would sit and watch Margaret dance, smiling proudly. Whenever Madame Anita called from China, Daniel answered calmly. "Where are you?" Anita would ask. "Hanging out, but I'll soon be home," Daniel would reply. "Who are you with?" "Alone," he would say. Margaret would be sitting beside him, laughing silently. She enjoyed every moment. She felt powerful. She felt chosen. She felt like she had finally won. Then one afternoon, Daniel's mother arrived. The entire house became tense immediately. Everyone knew her. She was a woman who spoke loudly and walked proudly. She always dressed like someone important. Her shoes always clicked loudly on the floor. Her voice alone could silence a room. As soon as she sat down in the living room, she looked around. Her eyes searched the house. "Where is she?" she asked suddenly. Daniel paused. "Where is who, Mum?" he asked carefully. She looked at him sharply. "Don't pretend. You know who I mean." Daniel hesitated. He stood up slowly and went upstairs. Margaret was in the room, fixing her hair in front of the mirror. She smiled when she saw him. "My mum is here," he said quietly. Margaret's heart jumped. She followed him downstairs. As soon as Daniel's mother saw her, she stood up immediately. Her face lit up like someone who had found gold. "Oh," she shouted happily, "this is her." She walked close to Margaret and looked at her carefully from head to toe. "Very beautiful," she said proudly. "This is exactly what I have been saying." She turned to Daniel. "This one will give you children." Daniel looked away. "Unlike the other one," his mother continued loudly, "we don't even understand her problem." She raised her shoulders proudly. "No pregnancy, no baby. Doctors say nothing is wrong, yet nothing happens." She waved her hand carelessly. "I feel sorry for her, but life must move on." Margaret lowered her head, pretending to be shy. Inside, her heart was dancing. Daniel sighed deeply. He never planned to treat Anita this way. He once loved her deeply. Maybe he still did. But he was an only son. His mother reminded him every day that she needed grandchildren. His mother sat back down. "I'm hungry," she said. "I want an English dish." She paused and added clearly, "Fish and chips, prepared well." Margaret quickly stepped forward. "I will prepare it." But the woman stopped her immediately. "No," she said firmly. Margaret froze. "You need to stop doing that," the woman continued. "You are no longer a maid." The room became quiet. "Very soon," she added confidently, "you will become a madam." Margaret could not hide her smile. It spread across her face slowly, proudly. Daniel only sighed again. After eating, Daniel's mother stood up to leave. Before leaving, she opened her bag and brought out some dollars. She handed them to Margaret. "For yourself," she said. "Take care of yourself." Margaret received the money with both hands. Her joy was too much. After that day, Margaret changed completely. She started talking to the other maids anyhow. She complained every day. "The kitchen is dirty. The food is tasteless. The house smells." Things Madame Anita never complained about. The other maids whispered among themselves. "She has changed. She thinks she already owns the house. But what can we do? She is acting like the madam now." Far away in China, Anita knew nothing. She attended meetings. She smiled during calls. She believed her home was safe. She did not know that everything had taken a new turn, and the turn was only beginning. While Madame Anita was still far away in China, living her normal work life and believing her home was still intact, something serious was happening behind her back. It started quietly. Margaret's family received a call. Daniel's family also received a call. At first, everyone said it was just a normal family meeting. Elders talking, parents advising. Nothing serious, but one meeting led to another. One discussion led to another. Before anyone could slow things down, decisions were already being made. Margaret's mother cried tears of joy. "This is God," she said happily. "Our daughter has finally found her place." Margaret sat quietly during the talks, lowering her head like a respectful girl, but inside her heart she was celebrating. Her dreams were finally coming true. Daniel's mother spoke proudly. "My son is an only son," she reminded everyone. "He needs children. He needs a future." Nobody mentioned Anita. Not once. No call was made to her, no message was sent, no consent was requested. It was as if she did not exist. Within a very short time, the traditional marriage was fixed. It was done quietly, without noise. No big celebration, just family elders, prayers, gifts and pictures. Margaret wore traditional clothes and smiled proudly. Women congratulated her. Men shook Daniel's hand. Some people whispered, but no one spoke openly. Daniel sat there quietly. He did not look excited. He did not look angry. He just looked tired. But he did not stop it. After the ceremony, things moved even faster. Daniel bought a new house for Margaret. A beautiful house, not too far from his office. When Margaret entered the house for the first time, she stood in the middle of the living room and looked around slowly. The walls were clean. The rooms were big. The kitchen was modern. She touched the wall and smiled. "This is my house," she whispered to herself. From that day, her confidence grew bigger. Daniel started taking her everywhere. He took her shopping. He bought her clothes. He bought her shoes. He bought her bags. One morning, he took her to his workplace. As they entered the office, people turned to look. Daniel held her hand proudly. "This is my new wife," he said. Some people smiled politely. Some looked confused. Some exchanged glances. Margaret smiled, but she did not know how to greet properly. She nodded awkwardly, feeling important and nervous at the same time. Back at the old house, the maids whispered daily, "Did you hear? They say our boss married her. What about Madame Anita?" God knows. Fear filled the house. Then 2 weeks passed. Daniel assumed Anita was still in China, but Anita had decided to return. She did not tell Daniel. She did not tell anyone. She wanted to surprise him. The gate opened slowly. Her car drove in. The maids saw her and froze. "Madam!" They screamed with joy. They ran toward her. Some hugged her. Some almost cried. "We missed you so much." Anita smiled, but she noticed something. The happiness felt forced. The house felt heavy. "How are you all?" she asked gently. One maid cleared her throat. Madam. "We thank God. Just little issues here and there." Before she could finish, the maid beside her bumped her hard. The maid stopped talking immediately. Anita frowned. "What issues?" she asked. All the maids replied together quickly. "Nothing, madam." Anita nodded slowly, but her heart tightened. She went upstairs. Her room looked clean, but cold. She sat on the bed. Something was wrong. Daniel did not come home early. She waited. She sat in the living room. The clock ticked loudly. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Her mind replayed old memories. Her chest felt heavy. At exactly 1 a.m. she heard the door open. She looked up. Daniel walked in. Margaret was with him. They were holding hands, laughing softly, relaxed, happy. They stepped into the living room. Then Anita spoke. "Hello?" The sound of her voice cut the air. Daniel froze. Margaret's smile disappeared. They released each other's hands immediately. "Anita," Daniel whispered, shocked. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Please, let me explain." Anita laughed, a soft laugh, a painful laugh. Margaret looked away, her heart beating fast. "So," Anita said slowly, standing up, "it's true." She walked toward Margaret. She looked at her slowly, from head to toe. Margaret felt small. Anita stepped back and turned to Daniel. Her face was calm, too calm, and Daniel knew that calm was dangerous. Anita stood in front of Daniel. The living room was quiet, too quiet. The clock on the wall was ticking slowly. Margaret stood a few steps behind Daniel, her hands clasped together, her heart beating fast like a drum. Anita looked at Daniel for a long time. She did not shout. She did not cry. She did not ask questions. She smiled. The smile shocked Daniel more than anger would have. Then Anita moved closer to him and lowered her voice so only he could hear. "Congratulations," she whispered. Daniel felt cold all over his body. "Anita," he called softly, his voice shaking. She nodded calmly, as if she had just said something normal. Then she turned toward Margaret. Margaret swallowed hard. She felt weak in her knees. She expected insults. She expected to be sent out of the house. She expected shame. Instead, Anita walked toward her. slowly, gently, and then she hugged her. Margaret froze. The hug was warm. The hug was firm. The hug felt real. "Wow," Anita said happily as she pulled back. "I'm so happy for this great news." Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. "At least," Anita continued with a bright smile, "she will give us a baby." Margaret's lips trembled. "My baby," Margaret replied, forcing a smile. Anita laughed softly. "It doesn't matter," she said calmly. "As long as it is our husband's baby, then it is our baby." Daniel felt his chest loosen. He released a long breath he did not know he was holding. Anita looked directly at Margaret again. "You know," she continued gently, "we can live together under the same roof as one." Margaret's eyes widened. "You are like a younger sister to me," Anita added warmly, "and I love you so much." Margaret nodded slowly, smiling bigger now. Inside her heart, something sweet and dangerous rose. Before Margaret could speak again, Daniel stepped forward quickly. "No," he said. Both women turned to him. "She won't be living here," Daniel added quickly. Margaret's smile faded slightly. "I already got her her own place," Daniel explained. "She only came here tonight because where we went out is closer to this house." He turned to Anita. "I promise she will leave by morning," he said softly. "I want you to be very okay and comfortable. You are peaceful and loving. You deserve all the peace you can get." Anita looked at him carefully. "Really?" she asked slowly. Daniel nodded. Anita smiled again. "She should stay here," she said. Daniel blinked. "The house is big enough," Anita continued. "All of us can stay here." Margaret's heart jumped with joy. "I don't have any problem with her staying here for now," Anita added. "You know," she continued with a small laugh, "she is the new madam." Margaret could not hide her happiness anymore. "I love it when two wives bond," Anita went on. "Eat together, cook together, go shopping together." Margaret smiled widely. "I'll stay here," she said quickly. Daniel turned to her in surprise. "Really?" he asked. Margaret nodded eagerly. "Yes." Before Daniel could argue again, Anita rushed forward and hugged Margaret tightly. Margaret closed her eyes and smiled. That night the house slept, but not everyone rested. Later in the bedroom, Daniel knelt in front of Anita. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I am so sorry." Anita looked down at him calmly. "You did nothing wrong," she replied gently. "You did the right thing." Daniel looked up at her, shocked. "You are an only son," Anita continued. "Your family needs children." She paused. "Who knows," she added softly. "God might answer me and give me a child through this." Daniel's eyes filled with emotion. He stood up and hugged her tightly. "You are just an angel," he whispered. Anita smiled quietly. After a moment, she asked softly, "Whose idea was it for you to marry another wife?" Daniel smiled a little. "My mom," he replied. "Oh," Anita said with a calm smile. "Okay." The next morning came. Anita woke up early. She dressed beautifully and knocked on Margaret's door. "Get ready," she said cheerfully. "We're going shopping." Margaret was surprised. "Shopping?" she asked. "Yes," Anita replied warmly. "You need nice things." They went out together. They entered big shops, expensive shops. Anita picked dresses. She picked shoes. She picked bags. Margaret followed her happily, laughing, feeling important. At a jewelry store, Anita picked up a gold necklace. It was heavy and shiny. She held it up and smiled. "When you give birth," Anita said softly, "I will give this to you." Margaret laughed shyly. "Thank you," she said. From outside, they looked like sisters. From inside, something else was growing. Something quiet, something dangerous, something that would soon change everything. Weeks passed. From the outside, the house looked peaceful and happy. Visitors who came around always admired the big building, the expensive cars, and the smiling faces. Anyone who did not know what was happening inside would think everything was perfect. But inside the house, things were slowly changing. Margaret walked differently now. Her shoulders were always high. Her steps were heavy with pride. She no longer greeted the other maids properly. If she greeted them at all, it was with a short nod or a cold look. Anita noticed everything. She noticed how Margaret sat on the same chair Daniel used to reserve only for her. She noticed how Margaret spoke to Daniel with authority. She noticed how the maids now rushed faster when Margaret called than when she called. Still, Anita said nothing. She smiled every day. She acted calm. She acted happy. One morning, before the sun fully rose, Anita woke up suddenly. Her stomach turned sharply. A bitter taste filled her mouth. She jumped out of bed and ran into the bathroom. She bent over the toilet and began to throw up. Her body shook, her head spun, her eyes became watery. She threw up until nothing was left in her stomach. When she finished, she washed her face slowly and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face looked pale, her lips were dry. She placed her hand on her chest and breathed deeply. "This is strange," she whispered. She remembered how she had been feeling tired lately. She remembered how certain smells had been disturbing her. She remembered how her body felt different. She quickly covered herself with a wrapper and went upstairs. She walked to Daniel's room and knocked. No answer, she knocked again. Still nothing. She pushed the door gently, but it was locked. She knocked again, harder this time. Suddenly the door opened. Margaret stood there, her eyes were sharp. Before Anita could even speak properly, Margaret pushed her aside. "I need to see my husband," Margaret said coldly. Anita staggered back, shocked. Margaret stood in front of her proudly. Anita's heart tightened, but she said nothing. She stepped aside quietly. Margaret entered the room and slammed the door. Anita stood outside the door. She did not move. She wanted to hear everything. Inside the room, Margaret's voice was loud. "I'm not feeling fine," Margaret said angrily. "My body feels strange." Daniel sounded worried. "What's wrong?" he asked. "You left me alone since yesterday," Margaret complained. "You didn't even check on me." "I'm sorry," Daniel said softly. "I didn't know." "I need to see a doctor," Margaret added. "I'm not okay." Daniel sighed. "All right," he said. "Let's go to the hospital." Anita closed her eyes slowly. Her heart beat fast. A few minutes later, Daniel and Margaret came out. Daniel picked up his car keys. "We're going to the hospital," he said. Anita followed them silently. At the hospital, nurses attended to Margaret immediately. They asked questions. They took samples. They ran tests. Anita sat quietly on a chair. She watched Daniel pacing up and down. After a long wait, a doctor came out with a smile. "Congratulations," the doctor said. "She is pregnant." The words filled the room. Daniel froze. Then he shouted with joy. "Pregnant," he repeated loudly. "Yes," the doctor said. Daniel hugged Margaret tightly. "My baby," he shouted happily. Margaret smiled proudly, touching her stomach. Anita stood up slowly. Her face was bright. She moved closer and opened her arms. "I'm so happy for you," she said warmly. Margaret hugged her lightly. No warmth, no joy. Anita felt it, but she smiled. On their way home, Daniel called his mother. "Mummy, it has happened," he said excitedly. "She's pregnant." His mother screamed with joy on the phone. That evening, the house became lively. Music played, food was served, the maids laughed and danced. Later that night, Daniel's mother arrived. She danced as she entered the house. She hugged Margaret tightly. "My daughter," she said proudly, "you have done well." She barely looked at Anita. During dinner, Daniel's mother spoke suddenly. "I want goat meat pepper soup," she said. Anita stood up immediately. "I'll ask the maid to prepare it," she said politely. Daniel's mother rolled her eyes. "Go and make it yourself," she said sharply. The room became silent. Daniel looked shocked. "Mummy," he tried to speak. Anita raised her hand gently. "It's okay," she said calmly. "I'll prepare it." She went into the kitchen alone. The kitchen was quiet. She washed her hands slowly. She prepared the soup carefully. She stirred it gently. Then she stopped. She looked around. No one was watching. She reached behind a small cupboard and brought out a tiny bottle. She opened it calmly. She sprinkled a small amount into the pot. Stirred once, covered it. She then dished the soup, carried it, and went downstairs with a smile. Everyone watched as she served Daniel's mother. No one suspected anything. Not yet. The goat meat pepper soup was served hot. Steam rose gently from the bowl as Daniel's mother lifted her spoon and tasted it. Everyone watched her quietly. The house was silent except for the soft sound of the air conditioner. She chewed slowly. She swallowed. The soup was rich. The meat was soft, the pepper was just right. Inside her heart, she knew the soup was good. Very good, but she did not want Anita to feel special. She dropped the spoon back into the bowl and wiped her mouth lightly. "You tried," she said coldly, "but it's not too tasty." The words hung in the air. Anita nodded calmly. "Yes, Ma," she replied softly. She did not argue. She did not explain. She did not defend herself. Daniel looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing. Margaret watched quietly, her lips curling slightly in satisfaction. Later that night, Daniel's mother prepared to leave. Her bags were packed. The maid stood by the door. Before stepping out, she turned to Anita. "From now on," she said firmly, "Margaret must not do anything stressful." Anita nodded. "Anything the maids cannot do, you will do it," Daniel's mother added. "Margaret is pregnant. She must rest." "Yes, Ma," Anita replied again. She did not complain. She did not protest. She only nodded. Daniel's mother entered her car and left. The gate closed behind her. Days passed. Slowly, things changed again. Margaret started demanding more attention from Daniel. "Why are you always busy?" she would ask. "You don't spend time with me like before." Daniel tried to balance things at first, but gradually he began to drift away from Anita. He stopped sitting with her in the living room. He stopped asking her how her day went. He stopped taking her out. Soon he stopped sleeping in her room. Anita noticed everything. She noticed how Daniel avoided her eyes. She noticed how his laughter no longer included her. She noticed how he spent most nights in Margaret's room. One night Anita sat alone on her bed. The room was quiet. Too quiet. She hugged her pillow and stared at the wall. Tears rolled down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered to herself. She did not know who she was apologizing to. God, herself, her marriage. She cried until her eyes became swollen. The next morning, everything changed. A loud scream filled the house. "Sir Daniel!" A maid ran into the living room. Daniel rushed out of his room. "What happened?" he asked. The maid was shaking. "It's your mother," she said. She is gone. Her maid just called the house telephone." Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" he shouted. "She said she passed away this morning and that they have been calling you, but you haven't been picking up." Daniel screamed. He fell to the floor and cried loudly. People gathered. Phones rang. Neighbors came. When Anita heard the news, she stood still. She did not scream. She did not cry. She smiled. A small smile. The burial day came quickly. The house was filled with people. Women wore black. Men whispered in low tones. At the burial, everyone looked at Margaret. They greeted her warmly. "Sorry, madam. Take heart. You are strong." They barely greeted Anita. Margaret stood proudly, holding her stomach. Anita watched from a distance. Her heart broke. She quietly entered a car and cried. She cried until she felt empty. After the burial, they returned home. Daniel was not himself. He did not eat. He did not talk much. Surprisingly, he spent most of his time in Anita's room. He slept there. He sat there. Margaret noticed. Her face hardened. One night after she visited him in Margaret's room, Anita stood up gently. "I'll make dinner," she said softly. Daniel nodded tiredly. She went into the kitchen. She sent all the maids away. "I'll handle it," she said. Alone in the kitchen, she cooked quietly. The pot boiled softly. Then she stopped. She reached for the small bottle again. She opened it slowly. She poured the content into the food, stirred gently, covered the pot. And then she carried the food toward the dining table. Her face was calm. Too calm. That night felt strange. After Daniel and Margaret finished eating the food, they did not talk much. Daniel said he felt tired. Margaret also complained that her body felt weak. They both went to Margaret's room and lay down on the bed. Within minutes, sleep took over them. Their breathing became slow. The room became quiet. The night swallowed everything. In another room, Anita sat alone on her bed. Her hands were shaking. Her face was wet with tears. She cried quietly, pressing her pillow to her face so no one would hear her. Her chest rose and fell heavily as she struggled to breathe. But even while crying, she was smiling. A painful smile. A broken smile. "I'm sorry," she whispered again and again. "I'm sorry. I didn't want it to end like this. She lay down slowly. Sleep came, but it was not peaceful. Days passed. On the fourth day, Daniel did not come out of his room. Margaret did not come out either. The maids whispered among themselves, "Is Madam okay? Why haven't we seen Sir Daniel?" Something is wrong. On the fifth day, Anita woke up early. Her heart felt heavy. She stood up and walked slowly toward Margaret's room. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Her hands trembled as she pushed the door open. The sight inside froze her. Daniel and Margaret were on the bed, still, quiet, not breathing. Their skin looked pale. Anita screamed and staggered backward. She fell to the floor. For a long time she sat there staring. Then slowly she stood up. She wiped her face. She walked outside calmly and called the security guards. "Call the police," she said quietly. The police arrived soon after. They blocked the house. They asked questions. They wrote reports. The maids were crying loudly. Some fainted. When the police finally asked Anita what happened, she surprised everyone. "I did it," she said calmly. The room went silent. "What did you say?" an officer asked. "I killed them," Anita repeated. "I killed my husband and his second wife." The maids screamed. Someone shouted her name. The police were shocked. "Why would you do that?" one officer asked gently. Anita took a deep breath. Then she started talking. She told them everything. How she loved Daniel. How she suffered quietly. How she accepted Margaret. How she was pushed aside. How she was treated like nothing. She also confessed about Daniel's mother. "She humiliated me," Anita said. "She made me feel useless." Her voice broke. By the time she finished, everyone was crying. Even the police officers wiped their eyes. As the police were about to take Anita away, something unexpected happened. One of the security guards suddenly ran forward. He fell on his knees. "Please wait," he shouted. "I need to confess." Everyone turned to look at him. The house became silent again. The guard was shaking badly. "It was a plan," he cried, "a wicked plan." He looked at the police. "Margaret was my girlfriend," he continued. "The pregnancy was not Sir Daniel's." People gasped loudly. "What?" someone shouted. The guard continued crying. "We planned it together. We wanted to use the pregnancy to collect money from Sir Daniel. After getting enough money, we planned to run away together." Anita screamed, a loud, painful scream. She held her head and fell to the ground. "My God," she cried, "my God, I killed for the first time in my life because of you." The guard crawled toward her. "I'm sorry," he cried. "I'm sorry. If I had spoken earlier, none of this would have happened." Anita cried uncontrollably. Regret crushed her heart. But it was too late. Both Anita and the guard were taken away. The case went to court. The whole city talked about it. People cried as they listened to the story. The judge gave his judgment. Anita was found guilty. She was sentenced to death. The security guard was sent to prison for many years. As Anita was led away, she looked back once. Her eyes were empty. A woman destroyed by silence, betrayal, and pain. Silence can destroy a heart. Betrayal can destroy a home. And when anger controls the mind, regret comes too late.